I got a call no parent ever wants. Your son just vomited in class. He looks pale, they said. I called my wife in panic. Her reply? Cold as ice. You're the father. Handle it. But when I got to the school, there were police officers waiting. One said, "Sir, please watch this footage." That moment changed everything I thought I knew about my family. Please stay with me as I tell you my story, and don't forget to support our channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing this with someone who needs to hear it. I remember my hands shaking as I ended the call with my wife. There was no concern in her voice, no rush to help, just cold distance. I didn't have time to argue or even process her words. I grabbed my keys and rushed out the door. My thoughts were all over the place. What happened to him? Was it something he ate? Did he faint? I drove like a maniac through traffic, horn blaring, heart racing. Every red light felt like torture. I couldn't stop thinking about my little boy sitting alone in some nurse's office, sick and scared. He was only 9, still just a kid. He needed me. And his mom. She had shut the door in my face, emotionally. When I got to the school, I expected to find the nurse, maybe a teacher, maybe some paperwork to fill out. But instead, I saw 2 police officers standing in the hallway near the front office. My heart dropped. My steps slowed. The nurse met me at the door and said, "He's stable now. But there's something we didn't expect." Her voice was calm but tight, like she didn't know how to say what came next. Then one of the officers stepped forward and asked, "Sir, can you come with us?" I nodded, but I was already starting to feel sick myself. They led me into a small room, one of those quiet, plain offices with just a table and a chair. On the desk was a laptop connected to the school's security footage system. "We need you to watch this," one officer said, "and tell us what you see." I sat down slowly, my knees weak. My mouth was dry. The screen flickered, and the footage began to play. I held my breath, and in that moment, before I even saw anything clear, something deep inside me whispered that life was about to split in half before this moment and after. The video footage played in silence. I leaned forward, eyes glued to the screen. The hallway was quiet, just students moving between classes. Then I saw him, my son. Small backpack, dragging his feet, looking pale. My heart sank, and then a taller boy walked up to him. At first, it looked normal, maybe a quick chat. But then I saw it. The older kid slipped something into my son's hand. My son looked around nervously, then quickly tucked it into his pocket. The footage paused. One of the officers looked at me. "Do you recognize that boy?" I shook my head. My mind was racing. What was he given? And why did he look so scared? That's when it hit me. My son hadn't been himself for days, maybe weeks. But I had told myself it was just a phase. He was quiet, more than usual, kept to himself. I'd find him awake late at night, sitting up in bed, eyes wide, not saying a word. I thought it was nightmares, or maybe too much screen time. I never pushed. And the drawings, God, the drawings. Just 3 nights ago, I found a picture in his backpack. It was messy, rushed. A dark figure with long arms, standing next to a smaller person. No faces, just red scribbles over their heads. I'd asked him what it was. He shrugged and said, "Just a dream." I let it go. I let it go. Now I was sitting in front of police officers, watching security footage of my child being handed something in secret, and all those moments came flooding back. Another memory hit me like a punch. Family dinner, maybe 5 nights ago. My wife had cooked spaghetti. My son pushed the plate away, said he wasn't hungry. I told him to eat just a little. He looked up at his mom, like he was waiting for her permission to speak. She didn't say a word, just kept scrolling on her phone. I remember asking him what was wrong. He said, "I don't want to eat." When I asked why, he just whispered, "My tummy feels weird after school." I looked at my wife. She rolled her eyes and said, "He's just being picky." She laughed it off. I laughed with her. But now, thinking back, there was nothing funny about it. Every quiet night, every moment he avoided eye contact, every time he flinched when someone touched his shoulder, I had missed it. All of it. The officer hit play again. My son walked off screen. The older student went in the opposite direction. Whatever that thing was, whatever was passed to him, it wasn't random. It was planned, hidden. The police were now treating this seriously. They weren't calling it food poisoning anymore. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run out of that room and find my son. Hold him. Ask him 1,000 questions. But all I could do was sit there and watch the footage, realizing that something had been happening right under my roof. Something was very, very wrong with my son. And I had no idea how deep it went. I confronted her that same night. Our son was resting quietly after we got home. The nurse said he was stable, but I couldn't sleep. I couldn't stop thinking about the footage, about the look in his eyes, and about that cold voice on the phone, the way she'd said, "You're the father. Handle it." So I asked her, "What's going on? Why didn't you care when I called you?" She barely looked up from the couch. Her tone was flat, almost annoyed. "He's fine now, isn't he?" That was it. No worry. No emotion. Not even a hug for him when we got back. I stood there in the living room, staring at her. Something felt wrong. Off. It was like talking to a stranger. I kept watching her face, waiting for some sign of guilt or concern, but she just looked back at the TV, like this whole thing was just another boring evening. Over the next few days, I noticed little things. She avoided eye contact whenever I mentioned our son, changed the subject, got angry easily. She was always on her phone, but I never heard it ring. Always texting, always locking the screen when I came close. One morning, while she was in the shower, I picked up her phone. I know I shouldn't have, but I had to. My gut wouldn't leave me alone. All her recent messages were gone. Not just deleted, wiped clean. No chats with friends. No call history. Nothing from the last 2 weeks. I opened the Uber app out of instinct. That's when I saw it. A trip she'd taken just 3 nights ago. Drop off at an apartment complex I didn't recognize. Not near her job. Not near any friends I knew. At 10:37 p.m. She'd told me she was working late that night. I remembered it clearly. I'd even offered to pick her up. She said no. This wasn't the first time either. Over the past few months, she'd been working late more and more. Always had a reason. Always came home tired, silent, straight to bed. I used to believe her. Why wouldn't I? We were married. We had a child. I thought we were building something together. Now I wasn't so sure. I didn't confront her yet. Not about the phone. Not about the Uber trip. Not yet. I needed to be sure. I needed answers. Real answers. Not her cold one-liners or tired excuses. But something inside me cracked that night. The trust one had in her. It started to fall apart, piece by piece. I didn't want to believe it, but deep down, I already knew. My wife was hiding something. And whatever it wasn't small. Sleep became impossible. The apartment address from the Uber receipt kept echoing in my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that something much bigger was happening behind my back, and it was time to stop pretending. We had installed a family tracking app years ago, mostly to check on each other in emergencies. I hadn't looked at it in a long time, but now I opened it and scrolled through the history linked to her phone. The pattern appeared almost immediately. For the last few months, she had been going to the same place, usually Tuesdays and Thursdays, sometimes on weekends. It wasn't near her work. It wasn't near any friends or family I knew. It was that same apartment complex. I dug deeper, checking her old receipts and comparing dates. One night she claimed she stayed at the office until 10:30, but her card had been used at a small Thai restaurant near that apartment complex at 7 p.m. Another receipt showed a gas station nearby. She had created a separate routine, one that had nothing to do with me or our son. Even her saved photos offered clues. I found one that seemed harmless at first, just a picture of our son at the zoo. But something about it made me look closer. In the reflection of the glass behind him, 2 figures appeared. One was clearly her. The other, a man tall, close to her, hand lightly resting on her back. They weren't just 2 people standing near each other. There was something familiar in their closeness. Comfortable. That night, I told her I'd be stepping out to meet a friend. She didn't ask questions, just nodded and said, "All right." 15 minutes later, she left too. I waited half a block away in my car, watching her tail lights disappear into the distance. Then I started driving. She didn't take any detours. Straight to the same apartment complex that kept showing up in all the clues. She pulled in like she'd done it many times before, parked without hesitation, and stepped out. She wasn't rushing or nervous. She checked her reflection in the car window, brushed her hair back, and walked up to one of the buildings. A man opened the door after a quick knock. Same man from the photo. He smiled like he'd been expecting her. She went inside without saying a word. The door closed behind them. I stayed parked across the street. The apartment building's lights cast long shadows, but the truth was already clear. Everything made sense now. The cold attitude, the missing messages, the late nights, the casual way she acted around me while sneaking off to another life. The pieces weren't scattered anymore. She had another man, a second life, built quietly, while I'd been focused on our son, our home, our future. She was never working late. She was here. And this time I saw it with my own eyes. The next morning, I couldn't focus on anything. Not work, not breakfast, not even the sound of cartoons playing from the living room. My son was on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, still weak from whatever had happened at school. I sat across from him, watching him more closely than ever before. He looked up and smiled when he saw me, but his eyes were tired, older than they should be for a 9-year-old. I asked how he was feeling. He nodded. Better. Later, when he was resting again, I went to my computer. I still didn't know who the man from the apartment was. I hadn't seen his face clearly in the video reflection or at the building door, but I remembered his build, his posture, his voice when he greeted her. I started with the school website, staff directory, teachers, coaches, assistants. Scrolled slowly, clicking on every photo, every name. Then I saw him, Mr. Luke, 6th grade science teacher. smiling in his photo. Clean cut. That same short beard. Something about his eyes felt off. Too rehearsed. Too clean. The name rang a bell. My son had mentioned it before. Mr. Luke showed us a volcano video today. Mr. Luke said we could work in pairs. Back then, I thought it was just small talk. A kid talking about school. I didn't think anything of it. But now it sounded different. Too familiar. I dug a little deeper. Mr. Luke had been at the school for over a year. That meant this wasn't something new. This had been going on for months. I tried to remember when my wife first started staying out late. It lined up, right around the time she stopped asking about how our son's day was, when she stopped sitting with us for dinner, when she started checking her phone during conversations. Pieces began to connect in a way I didn't want them to. This man, Luke, wasn't just some random person she met. He was around my son regularly, probably talked to him every day. She had brought this man into our world through the back door, like a shadow moving quietly through our lives while I stood in the light, completely unaware. Then the thought hit me, was this connected to what happened at school? The footage showed my son being handed something by another student. The police still hadn't told me exactly what it was. The tests weren't back yet. But what if it wasn't food poisoning at all? What if it was something given to him? Something arranged? And if so, was Mr. Luke involved? It seemed insane at first, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. Why would my son have looked so scared that day? Why would he have flinched when I asked him questions? Why would he avoid talking about anything that happened? Maybe he was told not to. By someone he trusted. Someone his mother had told him was safe. Mr. Luke. Suddenly this wasn't just an affair. This wasn't just about betrayal between husband and wife. There was something darker, more dangerous at play. And if I was right, then my son wasn't just a witness. He was being used. And I needed to find out the truth before it got worse. I waited until the house was quiet. My wife had stepped out for groceries, or so she said. My son was curled up on the couch with his blanket and his favorite stuffed toy. I sat beside him, unsure how to even begin. "Hey, buddy," I said softly. "Can we talk for a bit?" He looked up at me, eyes wide, unsure. He nodded slowly. I didn't want to scare him. I didn't want him to feel like he was in trouble. I just needed him to feel safe. I asked him how he was feeling again. He shrugged. "Okay, I guess." I took a breath. "Do you remember what happened at school? When you got sick?" He looked down at his hands. There was a long pause. Then he said, "I drank the juice Mr. Luke gave me." My throat tightened. "What kind of juice?" "It was in a small bottle," he said, barely above a whisper. He said it was a special juice for kids who are really good. He said it helps you relax. I tried to keep my voice calm. "Did he give it to you before?" He nodded. "A few times. But only when Mom said it was okay." That stopped me cold. "She told me not to tell you," he added, his voice even softer now. "She said you'd get mad and ruin everything." I stared at him, heart pounding. He was just a child, trusting, innocent. And she'd used that against him. So had that man. My own wife. The mother of my child. I felt a weight pressing down on my chest. I wanted to yell, to scream, to storm out of the house and confront both of them. But right now I couldn't do that. My son was looking at me, waiting for a reaction. I forced myself to stay calm. "Thank you for telling me," I said, placing a hand gently on his back. "You're really brave." He leaned into me, finally letting his guard down. I sat with him for a long time, just holding him, while my mind raced. This was no longer just about betrayal. This was something far worse. My son had been drugged, manipulated, instructed to hide it from me by the people who were supposed to protect him the most. The next morning, I went straight to the school and filed a formal report. I demanded to speak with the principal, showed them the footage, told them everything my son had said. Then I drove to the police station and did the same. It was no longer just about me. This was about justice, for my son, and for every quiet moment he had kept that awful secret. I couldn't undo what had been done, but I could make damn sure someone paid for it. The police didn't waste time. The moment I filed the report, something shifted. The officer who took my statement asked sharp questions and took detailed notes. When I told them about the apartment complex and Mr. Luke's connection to the school, and my wife, they didn't shrug it off. They asked for the address. I gave it to them. Within 24 hours, a search warrant was issued. I wasn't allowed to go with them, but they kept me updated. That evening, I got a call from one of the detectives. His voice was tight, professional, but there was something in his tone, something cold. "We found items of concern," he said. "We'll need you to come in tomorrow. We'll explain more then." The next day, I sat in a small room at the station, hands clenched in my lap. Across from me, the lead detective opened a manila folder and pulled out several photographs. He didn't slide them toward me, just glanced at them, then back at me. "There were videos," he said, "stored on a laptop in the apartment. Some of them included minors. One of the files had your son's name in the title." I felt the floor disappear under me. There were also receipts for multiple items, Small bottles like the one your son described, along with cash payments to untraceable apps. And there were personal items, things that belonged to children, including a school ID card we believe your wife provided. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My jaw locked. My chest tightened so hard I could barely breathe. This wasn't just an affair, the detective said. This man, Mr. Luke, was grooming your son, and your wife was complicit. She enabled it, covered for him, possibly more. I had prepared myself to find out she had been unfaithful. But this was something else. This wasn't betrayal between husband and wife. This was a betrayal of humanity, of a parent's most sacred duty. My wife hadn't just lied to me. She had put our child in danger, helped a predator get close to him, let it happen, over and over. Suddenly, the coldness in her voice that day made sense. The way she brushed off my panic told me to handle it. She had known what was going on. She had to. That kind of distance, that kind of detachment, it wasn't just selfishness. It was guilt. She didn't want to get involved because she was already too deep in it. The detective continued explaining the process, how both she and Mr. Luke would be taken in for questioning, how child services would be involved, how my son might need to give a statement, eventually. I barely heard any of it. My hands felt numb. My mouth was dry. It was hard to imagine how deep this had gone while I was at home, working, doing laundry, helping my son with his homework. All the while, this was happening in the background, a nightmare unfolding in slow motion, just out of my sight. She had been lying to me for months, maybe longer. Not just about where she was, but about who she really was, about what she was capable of. And now it wasn't just betrayal. It was a crime, a devastating, sickening crime. Everything I thought I knew about her, about our marriage, our family, was gone, burned to ash. Now, all that was left was truth. Cold, brutal, unforgivable. The courtroom felt colder than I expected. When I walked in and saw her at the defense table, I didn't know what to feel. Anger, pain, disbelief. They all crashed into each other inside me. She sat there straight-backed, lips pressed in a calm line, eyes scanning the room like she didn't recognize anyone. No emotion, no shame, not even when they brought in Mr. Luke. They didn't look at each other, but I could tell they didn't need to. They'd played this game together for months, maybe longer. Now they sat there like strangers, both trying to survive, hoping one would take more blame than the other. When the prosecution began, they started with the evidence. Phone records, messages recovered from deleted apps, bank transfers, and those disturbing receipts. They played clips from the apartment security camera, showing her entering the building multiple times, calm, smiling, laughing at the door. Then it was my turn to testify. I walked up to the stand and took a seat. My hands shook slightly. The judge nodded for me to begin. I looked across the courtroom, at the jury, at her, at everyone. I trusted her, I said. She was my wife, the mother of our child. And while I was working late, picking up groceries, making school lunches, she was meeting a man behind my back. I paused, swallowed hard. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what she let happen to our son. She let him be used, manipulated. She told him to keep secrets from me. She stood by while that man, Mr. Luke, gave him something that made him sick. And she called it love. She called it care. I glanced briefly at the jury. Some of them wouldn't meet my eyes. She didn't just betray me. She betrayed a 9-year-old boy who trusted his mother, who thought she was safe. And instead, she handed him over to someone dangerous. Repeatedly. Then came the hardest moment. The prosecution rolled in the monitor, the footage from the school. They played the clip of my son standing nervously in the hallway, the older student walking up to him, the object being passed, the fear in my son's face, the way he clutched the item and looked around, like someone had warned him to be careful. The room went completely silent. No phones, no paper shuffling, no coughs, just silence. Even the defense attorney looked down. When the footage ended, I could feel the weight of it in the air. One juror had tears in her eyes. Another shook his head slowly, disgusted. My wife still didn't react. Still no guilt, no emotion. She whispered something to her lawyer and adjusted her scarf. But by then, it didn't matter. Everyone in that room had seen what kind of person she really was. The sentencing came quickly after the verdict. She was found guilty on multiple counts: child endangerment, conspiracy, and obstruction. Mr. Luke's charges were even worse. The judge didn't hold back. He called their actions a complete betrayal of trust and a calculated violation of innocence. She got several years in prison. Luke got much more. He'd likely never walk free again. I sat in the courtroom when the judge read the sentence, but I didn't feel relief. Just quiet. Just stillness. It was over, yes, but the damage was still there. Our home felt different without her. Quieter, but heavier at first. My son didn't talk much those first few weeks. He was cautious, always looking at me like he was waiting for something to go wrong. I didn't blame him. He'd been told to lie, to hide things. He'd been caught in a storm without a life jacket. I decided not to push. I didn't ask too many questions. I just showed up for school drop-offs, for bedtime stories, for lazy Sunday mornings. Slowly, he started to meet me there. We began going to therapy together. At first, he wouldn't speak. He just sat there drawing. But the therapist didn't push him either. Week by week, his drawings changed. Fewer dark shapes. More color. One day, he drew the two of us holding hands under a tree. He slid it across the table and whispered, "This is us now." It nearly broke me. At home, we started small routines. Making pancakes every Saturday, reading the same silly joke book at bedtime, taking walks to the park. He began smiling again, really smiling. Not forced, not polite. Real joy. I saw it in the way he ran ahead of me on the sidewalk, in the way he laughed when I made a bad joke. One night, as I tucked him in, he said, "I'm glad you're still here." I nodded. I always will be. There are still moments of silence between us. Sometimes he wakes up from a nightmare and doesn't want to talk. Sometimes I hear a song or pass a place that reminds me of the woman I used to know, and my chest tightens. But we face it together now. Healing isn't fast. It's not perfect, but it's real. My son and I, we're building something honest. No lies, no secrets. Just us. We've been through hell, and we're still standing. And every day, that means something. Looking back, I still wonder how I didn't see it sooner. There were signs, quiet, subtle, but always there. My son's sudden silence. His fear of speaking up. The way my wife started pulling away, not just from me, but from him too. Late nights. Excuses. That empty look in her eyes when I mentioned our son. I wanted to believe everything was fine, that we were just going through a rough patch. I told myself I was overthinking, that kids go through phases, that couples get busy. But those were lies. Lies I told myself because the truth was too dark to imagine. What happened to us wasn't just a betrayal between husband and wife. It was something much deeper. It was war, a slow, creeping war fought in silence. In erased texts. In closed doors. In the quiet discomfort of a child too scared to speak. And the damage didn't happen in one moment. It happened over time. In every missed warning. Every night I said, "He's just tired." Every time I heard, "Don't worry about it," and listened. It took everything I had to face the truth. To walk into that courtroom. To sit across from the woman I once trusted with everything. To hear my son describe being drugged. To see the footage. To realize the world I thought I was building was already shattered. But I had no choice. I had to fight for my son. For his safety. For his voice. People talk about bravery like it's some big, bold thing. But sometimes bravery is just sitting down with your child and saying, "You can tell me anything," and meaning it. Sometimes it's standing up when everyone else wants to stay quiet. It's calling the police even when your heart is breaking. It's watching your world fall apart and still showing up the next day to make pancakes because your kid needs normalcy more than anything else. That's what this became. A battle for truth, for healing, for the right to protect the person who needed me the most. My son is doing better now. We talk more. We laugh again. He knows I'm listening. He knows I'll believe him. That's something no one will ever take from us again. To any parent who's hearing this, please listen carefully. Never assume silence means safety. Don't brush things off because they're inconvenient or confusing. If your child suddenly changes, stops talking, avoids someone, or draws something that makes you pause, don't ignore it. Look deeper. Ask questions. Stay involved. Because sometimes the real danger isn't loud. It's quiet. It hides behind smiles and routines and people you think you can trust. And by the time you realize something's wrong, the damage is already done. I learned that the hard way. But if this story reaches even one parent in time, then maybe something good can still come out of all this pain.